Many people ask about alkaline water, and there's so much information out there on the internet about alkaline water being a benefit. Now, I was in that industry 15 years ago, 16 years ago. I got involved in the alkaline water industry. And there were tremendous benefits when you would give people alkaline water from an electrolysis-based device when it was brand new. So why do I say it that way? Well, number one, we know for a fact in medicine that simply changing pH of water has no medical benefit at all. It makes no sense. I mean, if you actually use common sense, it's not even possible that it could do anything in the body. Where do the claims? The claims are that what? Alkaline water combats acids in the body. Well, this is false information. It's completely false. You also hear alkaline water makes you alkaline. Well, wait a minute. What part of the body are we talking about? I used to have people come up all the time, 15 years ago, 10 years ago, 12 years, whatever, and say, oh my gosh, alkaline water. Well, that's amazing. And I'm like, wait a minute. What are you talking about? Like, think about that for more than 2 seconds. The stomach is acid. We know that bile is a 1.5. We know stomach acid is a 1.5. We know the environment is a 4. When you add the juices and what have you that go with it, the environment itself is a 4 pH. What do you think is going to happen when you put in an 8 or a 9 pH water that is non-buffered? And what I mean by that is alkaline water has very little buffering capacity. So what happens? It doesn't get through the stomach. The pH of that water does not transfer into the duodenum or the duodenum and then into the small intestine. It doesn't work that way. It's not going to get there. When you're putting water in that has very little buffering capacity, the pH is going to be changed almost immediately. And we know this. We can put alkaline water in a beaker and we can drop 1 drop of lemon juice and we can see the pH plummet. Well, we know that the gastric juices, we know that stomach acid is far more powerful or buffering than lemon juice. So, alkaline water by virtue of pH has no medical benefits. But yet, many people, millions of people, had water machines that produced alkaline water and had tremendous health benefits. So where were the benefits coming from? In other words, what's the mechanism that's causing people to have these health improvements if it's not pH? Simply, it was hydrogen gas and the electrical potential, what we call ORP, oxidation reduction potential of water. That's where your benefits were coming from, and the fact that you're drinking water instead of soda. But the reality is it was not pH. It never was pH. And this has been proven now for years that it was hydrogen gas and the ORP, or the electrical potential of water, nothing to do with pH. Now, let's talk a little bit about, from a history perspective, why the world thought falsely that the pH of the water was the benefit. If we go back to the year 1800, when Dr. Anthony Carlisle, a surgeon in London, discovered water electrolysis, what was he doing that for? He wasn't doing it to change pH. He was doing it to create hydrogen gas. And we can go back and we can read and we can see that's why Dr. Anthony Carlisle created water electrolysis in the first place, was to harvest hydrogen out of water molecules. Now, largely nothing happened with his discovery until what? 1950, when Dr. Mishisuwa in Japan decided he wanted to take this water electrolysis, irrigate rice, and see if it would improve rice cultivation. It did improve rice cultivation. So then he began working with other plants, and then eventually, from that time, he got to 1950 when he began doing human trials. And between 1950 and 1965, Dr. Sua did human trials for 15 years on what would happen when human beings consume water from electrolysis. Now, at that time, these were called batch ionizers. So you had a cathode and an anode in a batch of a half a gallon of water, roughly, and they would run them for 20 minutes, half an hour, and then they would have people drink this water. So you weren't changing a lot of pH, but you were getting hydrogen gas in there. You were getting Brown's gas. You were getting a number of things in there, and they would give that to patients and to see how they would help. So after 15 years of human trials, what did they prove in Japan? Because the country of Japan in 1965, the Japanese Ministry of Health made these type of devices, these electrolysis devices, a medical device in the country of Japan, because they proved they helped or cured digestive disorders, improper fermentation in the gut. In other words, gut issues were helped by these devices. So based on these findings, they began using this type of water to help those with gut issues and those with digestive disorders. Later, they found that it helped with cancer and diabetes and other things, but they didn't really understand why. Because of the fact that the pH of the water was the easiest thing to test at that time, they made an assumption that the pH was the mechanism of action in the body. It wasn't until years later that that was proven false. They figured out it was the hydrogen gas and it was the electrical potential of the water. They even thought at one point it was the structures, the water cluster sizes, which they later found out in the 1980s that was false as well. So what we settled with as far as a truth perspective was hydrogen and the electrical potential of the water is where the mechanism of healing comes from, is where the benefits come from. So we can get rid of the pH because that actually puts a burden on the body. If we really look at what happens in the stomach, for example, when we drink water that's higher pH, the body now has to produce hydrochloric acid to bring that pH back down. For many people, it's difficult to produce hydrochloric acid as it is. So the fact that you're going to give them alkaline water to drink is going to put a burden on their body. And when they can't produce hydrochloric acid readily or easily, now you've put a metabolic burden on their body and it's going to stress their system out. So we can save all this by not changing pH, just giving them the proper components that helped the healing in the beginning, which is hydrogen and the negative electrical charge in the water, or the negative electrical potential. So this is what I did. This is what I did. Focused on hydrogen and focused on the electrical potential of the water and did not change pH at all because it's unnecessary to the body. For the second myth that we'll talk about of alkaline water changing your body to alkaline, I used to ask people, wait a minute, you're telling me that when you drink alkaline water, it makes your body alkaline. Well, what part of the body are we talking about? Are you talking about the stomach? Surely we know that's not true. Are we talking blood? Are we talking, well, which organ are we talking about, right? So they would, of course, immediately not know what to say because that's a little too deep for that conversation. We know for a fact in medicine that every organ has a pH it functions at, blood has a pH that it functions at, the stomach has pH that it functions at. You and I are not going to change that because it's mission critical. The body will do everything it can to mandate or maintain the proper pHs for every organ and every system because it's critical to the design of its function. For example, blood pH, 7.35 to 7.45. Tiny window, 7.35 to 7.45. You go outside of that, you begin to go into shock. So we're not going to manage that, right? That's done through breath. We know that we control pH of the blood through breath. So you can breathe one more time a minute and have more effect than drinking water. But as we really put our thinking caps and understand medicine and understand what's going on, We know that pH in water is not going to affect the body. Because if it did, let's just have a little fun here for a second. What if changing water to an 8 or a 9 pH had dramatic effects on the body? What would happen if you drank a soda that's a 2.5 pH? You should die instantly then, right? If we're saying that alkaline is going to improve health and acid's going to make you sick, well, crap. One glass of soda that was a 2.5 pH, you should just die immediately, right? If what we're saying is the higher pH increases pH in the blood, lower pH decreases pH in the blood, you'd be dead. You'd be dead with one glass of soda. So we know for a fact that's not happening. We know that the pH of a solution going into your stomach does not translate into blood pH, does not translate into gallbladder, pancreas, kidney. I mean, it's just not happening that way. It's not the way it functions. So please don't buy into these nonsense conversations. Understand medicine, understand what's happening in the body, and it has nothing to do with the pH of the water itself. So please don't get sucked into buying bottles of water that have higher pH. This is not a benefit to your body. We see water pH coming from very low to very high. We can have pH in the 5s all the way up to 8.4. The range is wide, and it's all based on what? The mineral content in the water. That's what changes pH, is the mineral content and how much TDS there is in the water. So when it comes to alkaline water, I hope this has helped you taking a little journey through history, understanding how the alkaline water industry started, how these machines began to be produced. And listen, they believed at the time it was due to pH, so they made devices that changed pH. The major weakness in these machines, however, was that the cathode in the electrolysis chamber, that's the negatively charged electrode, it would get scaled up by the positively charged minerals in the water. So you had a negative electrode, positive minerals, they like each other. They have an affinity to one another. Opposites attract. The reality is, after as short as 2 weeks, you would have these electrodes filled up with calcium, no longer able to dissolve hydrogen gas, and no longer affecting the electrical potential in the water, and therefore you would lose the benefits. The therapeutic benefits would be lost. That was the problem with these machines. When they were brand new, people would have miracle events. People would say, wow, I feel so much better. Within a few weeks, no more. They wouldn't feel it anymore until they cleaned it eventually with citric acid or high concentration vinegar to get the calcium off of those electrodes. Then they would feel better again. So we just skipped all that. We designed a machine that won't get scaled up, can't get scaled up. The cathode never touches the water in our hydrogen chamber in the first place, so you can't have calcium build up when you're never touching it with the water with calcium in it. So we only focus on hydrogen and the negative electrical charge, which is where the benefits come from. So this is what we have done, and this is why. So I hope this has helped you understand why alkaline water came and went and is on its way out, because there is no benefit medically from having higher pH water. You may have a tiny, tiny benefit, kind of like taking Tums, by drinking water with a higher pH. It could act as a buffer, tiny, tiny bit, but that's it. That's all that we're going to get. And many people talk about how alkaline water absorbs faster in the body. Well, what that is also based on is the fact that it's just a faster gastric emptying. So it leaves the stomach fast. But that's not because it's better, or it's not because it's being absorbed into the body. It's because the body said, the stomach is an acid environment. Get that out of here. That's high pH. We don't want high pH stuff in here. Get that out. And you have a pyloric valve at the top of the stomach and the bottom of the stomach, and they are somewhat pH sensitive. So as soon as you drink water with a higher pH, the pyloric valve says, whoa, get that out of here. And it dumps into the duodenum or the duodenum. And so this is natural, this is how the body works. We have to understand anatomy. We have to understand how the body functions. So again, I hope this helps you understand alkaline water, the good, the bad, and the ugly, and why we don't at all focus on drinking water with a higher pH.